all that have joined us for this special meeting of the Town of Matthews Board of Commissioners. It's a budget workshop tonight, mostly. We'll be talking about the fiscal year 2021 budget. We'll also be speaking about the establishment of a citizen steering committee for the locally preferred alternative for the Silver Line, and also consider the use of parklets in public parking areas for temporary restaurant seating. This meeting is obviously being held virtually, so using the Zoom platform. It's also will be live streamed on YouTube as well. Those links are available on our website. I'd like to turn the reins of the meeting over to Town Manager Hazen Blodgett to discuss the budget.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. So this is our third work session, and as the board knows, the budget has been worked on by the staff as at the direction of the board, and the budget is the board's document. So really, I think we're open to answer any questions. I think Commissioner Miller wanted to talk about a few things, and we just go from there.
Thank you. Should I start off?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. An email went out from Hazen concerning police expenditures, fire and EMS expenditures, and public works expenditures over the last 6 years. And my reasoning is this: it's not to downplay or attack any one department. It's just to rethink where our money is going and where our goals are being set. And if I look, for example, I'll start with the public works chart. It's down $1.2 million since last year. And although it's a 21% increase since fiscal year 16 over the last 6 years, even though it's a 21, can we go to the public works, please, Lori? Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. You've anticipated my ask.
So that 6.4 versus 7.6 last year, the 6.4 versus 5.6 in fiscal year 16 at the far left. It's only gone up $800,000 over 6 years. It's down 1.2 million since last year. And yet this board, I've heard this board say, we expect road improvements. We are discussing more planters to beautify downtown Matthews and expanding the footprint of the pretty planters or hanging baskets. We want landscaping improvements. And as we add on parks, those types of things need to be maintained. And Public Works is expected in their landscaping division to do that. And I don't think we are funding what our expectations are. And so I would caution the board to consider that. If we go to, let's say, if we go to fire and EMS next, please, Lori, same slide. Thank you. My summary of this slide is that it's up $0.9 million, which is roughly a 60 or a 55% increase. And that's a substantial increase. You know, I've heard about belt tightening, I've heard about cuts, I've heard about savings, but yet $2.9 million, or that's a $1.1 million increase. I'm sorry, it's a $1.1 million increase. It's a 61% increase if you look at the 1.8 on the left and the 2.9 on the right. I hear buzzwords like we're trying to save as much money, we're making cuts, we're doing the belt tightening. But a 61% increase is substantial. I'm not saying they don't need it. I'm not saying that Chief Kinneberg isn't making the department more professional than it's ever been. I'm just saying, let's look at the three departments because millions count. And if we go to the same slide on police, please, Lori.
Jeff, could I speak to something before we go to the police on the fire MAS?
Sure.
Could you go back to that? All right, now, Jeff, you got to keep in mind now, we in the last 2 years or the last year, we went from a partial fire department to a full-time fire department where we are fully staffed now. So you gotta see the difference, even though there was an increase, but we brought on some people to make that a full staff for the town. That's an improvement. It's not just like it's not like it were when we were looking at 16 to where we are today, because what we were in 16 is way different to what our department is today. So it's not apples to apples if you look at 16 to 19 or 20, 21.
Okay, I understand, but we have added 10 new firefighters. We have gone to a 24-hour model. But I understand, Larry, what you're talking about, and I understand the needs. I'm just, I'm really trying to rah-rah for public works at this point. I'm not here to break down police or fire. I just think public works needs some support. Thank you.
I'm wholehearted with that, but at the same time, in the comparison of what you're showing, see, and I'm hollering because I heard, and I know all of y'all have too, that this area of town does not have coverage with a fire department other than Idlewild. And so that's why I'm with fire and EMS in our budget. I don't think 2.9 million is a lot ass when you're looking at only from 16 to 21. That's not a lot of money. Consider where we were. See, I know where we were in 15, 16 and to where we are today, and we're leaps and bounds, but you're not showing a lot of money difference in that. And there's still a need in that. So, but I just wanted to throw that out to you, Jeff. But I'm with you on the public work. Go ahead.
Can I jump into, while I agree with the sentiment that public works needs some cheerleading for sure. We need to, there's a lot of funding there missing. Pitting one department against another for these funds probably is not the greatest for town staff. What we have to do is kind of compare what the actual need is. And when you look at the fire department and the chart that I sent out earlier, our fire department really isn't working on a big budget as compared to other towns of similar size. So they have gained a lot. They've gotten more career firefighters, but there's still a lot missing there. And to look at a $2.9 million budget is really not a big budget for a fire department for a town like Matthews.
Jeff, can you go ahead and finish your thought process? I know you wanted to look at police.
Yeah, thank you. Police expenditures have gone up by $1.8 million, or a 31% increase during that same time. And during that time, we've made a market adjustment for salaries. We've added telecommunication supervisor, 2 of them. We've added SUVs, new radios. We've made sure we're in the 60% of the competitive job market, adding 6 new positions, 9 vehicles. We typically add 7 new vehicles a year, et cetera. And you know, there's new needs of, let's say, reinforcing or armoring the fortress or whatever the terminology is. But I really think that with all the echoing of hearing the comments about we need to do something about our roads, we need to increase the planters and the hanging baskets and beautify the town and make landscaping improvements between 485 and downtown Matthews, because that's our gateway, so to speak, that I think that CJ has been laying low or been very polite and, in my opinion, perhaps a little too, not too anything, but a little on the timid side. And I think he deserves more credit. I think he deserves more funding, because everything we talk about involves public works, yet we're not walking the walk. That's about all I have, really.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. Lori, can you go back to the public works slide, please? Corey, are you on this call?
Yes.
Sorry, actually, I guess I want to talk to CJ. Can you remind me what the 7.6, CJ, can you remind me what the 7.6 million, that's an anomaly, an outlier compared to all the other years. So we spent a lot of money in fiscal year 20. Or Hazen, do you want to take that?
Sure. So, and CJ, please fill in the gaps. So what happens is every year we get Powell bill money, and then we also have some paving dollars that we throw to paving. Up until, well, probably going forward, it may be a little differently, but going backwards, you would bid this stuff out. Let's say we bid it out in the fall, and the contract would say the paving season, which could be from April to the next October. And so what would happen is we'd get these money would roll over from one fiscal year to the next. Now we keep it in a separate fund and it doesn't get spent. So in this year we had a very large anomaly, and that's why it's so high, is because we had $2.4 million in paving, not because it was a one-time dollars from Powell bill that came in and souped it up, let's say, and next year is more of a typical year because we'll end up spending down all of our Powell bill funds, and we'll get another, well, we're showing $800,000. CJ, would you clarify anything I just said as a better answer?
So yeah, I'd phrase it just a little bit differently. So, we spend a lot of time trying to keep our roads in good condition with pavement preservation. But if you keep doing that, then you have the roads at the bottom of the curve that continue to decline. So every 4 or 5 years, we try to put one budget together to bring those lowest roads back up to good condition. And that's much more expensive. So I save a little bit back each year towards that goal. So that's why we're spending so much this fiscal year as compared to most fiscal years, because that's what we're doing this year.
I guess the reason I wanted to point that out is, other than fiscal year 20, this year's we've spent the most, we're budgeting the most in the last, second most of the last 6 years. I have a question for Commissioner Miller. Do you have a reallocation suggestion for the budget where we would get more funding to increase our public works expenditures?
No, sir, not specifically. I just feel that we are trending up on police and fire. 61% increase in spending on fire and EMS, and a 31% increase in police. And I feel they're both doing a good job. I feel both chiefs are extremely professional. But during these tough times, etc., I just feel that Public Works needs a little more love or representation or a few more dollars. I do not have specifics. I'm sorry.
Lori, could you put the, so we can see all the participants up again, take the presentation down? Does anybody, would anybody like to comment on what Jeff has said, or?
I have a
Perhaps-
question. Can I ask?
Sure. Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
This is for, I guess, for Hazen, really the extending the planters in town beautification. I remember that coming up with previous boards, and then also talking about it in our planning conference, but those aren't included in this budget. Is that, are they, or?
So they've already been put in the budget, and we're going to extend those planters to, CJ, is that correct? I got to be careful. I think it was in this year's budget, and we're still planning on doing that.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And it's going to go to 50.
Greenway.
And then is it going to go all the way back to, I didn't know if it was just going to stop at 51 and go back towards Stumptown Park. Is it both ends or just towards 51?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look at it.
Okay.
I thought it was to the Greenway and 51 was phase 2, but again, if he's not sure, I'm certainly not sure either.
Could I make a suggestion or a question? Unless materials have been ordered, is that, I mean, maybe that's something we want to put back into Public Works in another way and not extend. Because to me, I guess extending planters would seem frivolous in a year we're talking about a very tight budget. So anybody have any thoughts on that?
Well, what is the cost? And I'm sorry.
That was what I was going to ask too.
If I remember, I think it was somewhere around $30,000, and it was using tourism funds. So it's not coming out of the general fund.
However, the labor, CJ, of daily watering and things like that, is that out of your labor cost, or is that out of tourism as well?
No, that's out of our general operating costs.
I would say you could put that, at least those funds, back into your department work hours. I'm not particularly a fan of needing to have more planters right now.
So what would happen if the board chose not to? So right now it's in the budget. We plan on doing it. If the board says, well, let's just hold off, what happens? The money doesn't get spent, just rolls into the general fund. Now, if you guys said, well, we want to reappropriate that $30,000, you could, but what it would be is like a $30,000 appropriation from the general fund into the operating budget, which y'all asked us to work hard not to appropriate any funds from the general fund, but that would be the option if you wanted to deploy that $30,000 for something else.
I mean, we couldn't change the line item title for Public Works, so it stays within Public Works. Jeff is making a good argument that Public Works needs a little more love than what we're giving them.
Hazen, I'm sorry, I want to clarify, those funds for the planters themselves, they're tourism funds, correct? So we can't put them back into the general fund.
I don't remember that they are tourism funds.
I thought it was part of the RNC.
I think they might be.
We justified this expenditure.
And then it would go back into the general fund of the tourism. I mean, obviously it's the board's budget, but my suggestion, because I think we all feel frustration, like this is not a good budget. It's not a budget any of us are proud of, but given the circumstances, it's like, here's where we're at. And, and who knows what the future holds. But I think that's why we are excited about doing some kind of mini conference, let's say in October, and to talk thoughtfully about, because the fire department, as a good example, we've made great progress and we should be very proud of that, but it is not a complete department. Now, in response to Commissioner Whitley's comment, there is what happens if there's a fire over on, let's say, that side of town, all of our stations get deployed. But from a service standpoint, it would be better to have a station kind of in that Purser Park area. So, I mean, I think there's just, I don't, want to say a plethora, but there's a number of issues that I think to everybody to breathe deep and have some time and let y'all think about it. And hopefully the economy's in a better spot so we can think about this, because I think our concern is 28 cents on a tax dollar with the expectation the quality of services this community and you guys and we want to provide is an artificially low tax rate. And I know that's painful to say, but I think we have to start having those conversations. And then I think it probably should be a community conversation too. Like, what does the community want?
Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. Three subjects. First, if we would have stayed at 32 or 33 cents, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Number two, it's not necessarily the planters that are the stressor of public works. It's roads, road improvements, road maintenance, which everyone on the board has discussed. And three, on the topic of a fire department. In this commissioner's opinion, we don't need to buy across the street from Purser Halsey Park, where we have 95 acres. We can put that, we don't need to buy land. We can find a location on Purser Halsey property where we can put Fire Station 3 or whatever it will be determined to be called without buying property. It's in the same location. Topography can be overcome. That's all I got.
Thank you. Have any other comments about or questions about the budget from anybody? Commissioner McCool.
Can we put a fire department on Purser Halsey Park? So if I may be mistaken, but we don't own that land. We're leasing that land. And
From the county.
From the county. So this may be a question for Hazen, but is that even a possibility to do?
So what we did when we worked out the deal to get the property, there's 2.5 acres that the town actually owns.
Okay.
It is downhill. I don't think it's not a great location for a station, but I think that's a great question, and we can just talk about it at a mini conference about, okay, is this doable, or is it not optimal, or could we negotiate with the county and say, let's trade for some other, we'll give you this 2.5 acres. Can we get another 2.5 acres? I don't know, but I do think it's a good example of let's have a good, thoughtful discussion about it.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner, you had asked for some additional information from staff. Do you have any comments on the budget?
I do have, well, first I have some questions for Chief Pennington. I see his name. Okay.
There he is.
Thank you. We both received an email today, and the email, basically I'm going to read from it, but it reflects questions that I've received from other people in Matthews. And so I want to start with that. And on your department budget, you have line items for training. And usually that training, you decide at some other point how you disperse the funds for training. In light of last week, a lot of people are asking about de-escalation training and what our police department does in Matthews for de-escalation training. Is that something that you continually do? Is that something that would be in your training this year? Tell me a little more about what your training dollars will be spent on.
Sure. De-escalation training is always a key part of the use of force continuum, right? So when we talk about getting some level of resistance, whether it be passive or active resistance against something that needs to be done, officers are trained annually on how to deal with that. And part of that is the de-escalation, using evidence-based de-escalation tactics. So when we talk about evidence-based de-escalation tactics, we also use a formula or training that's provided when we start dealing with what's called crisis intervention training. So crisis intervention is training officers on how to deal with individuals who are in some level of crisis, whether it be mental crisis, emotional crisis, where they're trying to deal or process the thing, whatever it is that is happening to them. So I will tell you, just since I've been here in 2018, we've had many different levels of training and types of training that deal with de-escalation, and also in deal with use of force and how to de-escalate so that we can show a reduction or try to reduce the amount of intervention that we have to take, whether it be physical or non-physical. So just some examples. In 2018, we've had leadership through community partnership training, which basically overviewed how to lead a community by partnership, not trying to lead from, articulation or telling somebody what to do, rather than how do we get that buy-in to kind of move the process forward. We also had 2018 communication skills with persons in crisis, de-escalation techniques. The entire department went through that. That is what we call mental health first aid. So mental health first aid is an additional level of training on CIT. So CIT is really your top level tier, where the officers are trained to work with mental health professionals to de-escalate. Mental health first aid is what are we trying to identify an individual who's in crisis, and then work through that process to get them from their heightened level of escalation, if you will, to try to drop that down so that we can get some level of buy-in and ultimately reduce the amount of force, physical force, that might have to take place should the person have to go to the hospital or should we have to make an arrest. 2018, we also had strategies to improve law enforcement interactions and relationships with minority youth. Again, talking about culture, talking about how do we communicate with those individuals and how do we get some level of buy-in to the ultimate end result that has to take place without resorting to some level of force. 2018, we also had equality in policing, which is talking about exactly what the country's going through right now, is that we treat everybody equally. Doesn't matter on race, gender, sexual orientation. It's an equality type perspective of how we police. 2019, we also went through individual wellness and coping with stress. We were talking about officers, and again, we're not only just talking about dealing with the individuals in crisis, but officers who are subjected to that routinely tend to have a level of stress when they go home. So we wanted to talk to the officers, and this block of instruction was about how do they deal with those things. Lastly, we had a situational awareness and subject control technique where we talked about safety and how do we move should we have to go from a de-escalation. Because listen, I'll be completely honest with you, this work is inherently ugly, right? I mean, we're talking about police officers who sometimes have to use force. That's a part of our job that nobody wants, but we understand that it's a reality, right? There are people out there who are trying to take advantage and systematically hurt others. So we are that line of defense. We understand it has to take place, but we at the police department want to make sure our officers are trained on the most effective way to deal with an individual, to take them into custody, hopefully causing less injuries to the officers and less injuries to our individuals that we're arresting. So the monies that we get every year are not just going towards use of force, but hopefully I'm trying to articulate and lay out a pretty complex and in-depth conversation we have with our training staff every single year about what is it that we want to reinforce, what is it we want to push, how do we make sure that our officers are using empathy, they're using level of concern and care, and ultimately treating everybody with dignity, right? As long as we're treating somebody with dignity, the end result, no matter how it has to go, ultimately, at least they're treated with dignity. Unfortunately, and I learned this, and I think I put this in an email to one of you guys this week, was, I learned very, very early on in my career that sometimes we have to take somebody's freedom because they've violated a crime, but we will never take their dignity during the enactment of that. So as far as the rest of the training, there's many other needs the organization has. So that money goes towards each division and some of those needs. We talk, if you look at CID, Criminal Investigation Division, some of that money's going to go towards interview and interrogation. How do we ensure we're getting a realistic and admissible admission, if you will, or a statement from a victim or a suspect? We also deal with, part of that money goes towards teaching our officers how to deal with individuals who are victims of sex crimes. How do you communicate with them while they're in that crisis to help them cope with and get them their assistance? So that money goes to a broad spectrum, but just talking in depthly about what you talked about, de-escalation, we do take it very seriously.
So let me ask a couple more questions. Is there adequate funding for you to get some crisis de-escalation training? So taking it to the next level and being prepared for who knows what can come. And also, and I've been urging council or Hazen and staff to do this, but implicit bias training within your department. So, you know, as things unfolded across the country, I have been reading experiences of friends of mine that grew up in Matthews and had experiences with Matthews Police. And this is, you know, 25 years ago. So it's a different department and a different time, but that doesn't minimize their experiences with police and how that's shaped their experiences now with police. And I think a lot of those instances could have been prevented with understanding our biases, really unwrapping that, and police going out, you know, with that recognition that maybe that people of color simply driving and getting pulled over can be a traumatic experience. And so can we get some assurance that your training covers preventing those experiences for the residents of Matthews?
Yes, I think, let me go back to a couple. I think you had multiple questions in there. First question was, is the funding adequate to provide a level of training that we need to continue along the process that we've been going, at least from what I'm experienced the last 2 years? Absolutely. Would I love to say, no, give us more money? I mean, of course, that would be crazy not to say, hey, give me more money. But in reality, you know, looking at our funding, it's all about priorities. We have to identify exactly what it is we want to do and how we're going to progress as an organization. This is a huge priority for us. We actually were sending an officer to a cultural diversity type training in dealing with recruitment, because again, and I'll come back to your traffic stops here in a minute, but we're looking for that total package. We're looking for the opportunity to understand cultural differences, whether it be race, ethnicity, or other cultural experiences, how we can make sure our officers understand that, because that's going to make them better police officers. To your question about traffic stops, I would submit that any traffic stop, no matter who you are, is absolutely stressful. But I do understand what you're saying here in today's day and age. You know, I don't understand exactly what it's like to be a African American who sends their child out into the world and they're fearful. I get that. So we do work with our police officers on implicit bias. Part of the 21st Century Policing Initiative that was brought on many years ago that most police departments structure their entire organization and training around. We do that here in Matthews also. Part of our promotional process that we did for the lieutenant's process, that we're doing for our sergeant's process, that we're doing for our first line supervisor and corporal, is all dealing with the 21st century policing. And they push that implicit biasness, because if you can understand the bias that you have without a level of racism, but it is a tough implicit side, then you can kind of deal with that culture and hopefully understand what it is they're going for and going through and work with them to come out with a positive resolution. So the long part of that answer is absolutely. That is part of where we're continuing, and hopefully I laid that out from you since 2018, and we're not going to stop. On June 5th, I believe it's Saturday, we are doing a complete full review of our use of force. We are doing a full review of our standards of conduct, which I sent to some of you in an email, and I responded to a question on Facebook this afternoon or this evening on that same thing. We hold each other accountable, and we are going to hold the individuals accountable that aren't holding others accountable. I mean, that is a whole portion of this stratified policing model. I've been pushing it since I got here about stratified policing. It's not a law enforcement strategic plan. It is a law enforcement accountability plan. How do we hold everybody in our organization accountable for what they do or what they don't do? And that's what we're committed to.
I have something to say with that, Chief. And if I may, you and I talked about, and I as a person of color, Black person. I have struggled this week probably harder than any other time in my life or career with what I've seen. And in 2015, I decided to run for commissioner just because there was no representation of color. And what I ran on then is what I stand on now, and I want y'all to hear me because I'm feeling really bad in that my black skin is under attack, and that's, you know, I live this. I'm not talking something I'm hearing. In 1975, when I came on the State Highway Patrol, I experienced racism and bias and prejudice and overlooked, setback, passed over, not good enough, and I fought to prove myself. I had to be better than the other people just to prove myself. And I know where I come from. I didn't rich. My dad and mom were real poor, but at the same time, I got a little grandson that's 17 years old, and I got young black men in my church, young boys, that I have to train if they'll stop, how they can make sure that they don't get killed or shot. And I'm not saying that about Matthews Police Department, but I am part of Matthews. And so what Renee was asking, I was going to ask, but she beat me to the punch. But I know when I came on the board as a commissioner, I asked for some diversity training and bias training. We did have that. Now, I want to think that was 16 before you got here, Clark. And everybody was participating. I think all the commissioners. And I had this meeting with Hazen on Friday. I'd like for us to revisit some diversity and bias training for our officers. I think it's that important. I think it's that relationship is when blacks and white can talk and break bread together, and you get to know me, and we've done that, Chief, and I have full confidence in you and the conversation that you and I had in making this police department better, and I believe that. I'm for that. But I'm still have to talk to my grandson today, even today, 17, driving. When you stop, show your hands. And I don't believe white fathers have to tell their sons that. I don't believe that. Not how to get home safely if you pulled over. So what I'm suggesting is, and what you're talking is good, and what you're training is good. But I think for Matthews, we need to continue to do a bias and diversity training, not just for the leadership staff, but all officers. Because I know who I worked with when I was a trooper, and I know some of the things that said, and I just want to make sure that Matthews never, ever, if we got somebody on the road that feels some kind of way about black skin, I want to know it. I want to know it, and I want to address it. And they don't need to be on the road. And that's just the bottom line of it. And I believe you feel the same way from what we talked to, Chief. But that's one of the things that I feel strongly about, and that I would like to see that not put off. Not put off. I think what we're seeing across the country is about George, but at the same time, it's deeper than that, in that people of color are still not treated equally in America. And I suspect I'm going to ask some questions and some answers and a little bit farther in this that hopefully will shed some light. And I hope it don't prove what I'm thinking here in Matthews. But at the same time, I would like to see, Chief, see if we can work some diversity of bias training this last 6 months in the year for our officers.
Chief, would you like to respond to that?
Other than absolutely.
Chief, and Mayor, Chief, I want to say this. Clark and I had talked, and I think he knows, and we talked in some of his department up north and the highway patrol, we went through some of the same things back in the day. I think we understand the reality of where we are and where we're going. And that's the main thing, is understanding where we are and where we're going, and then make a difference. And I believe in wholeheartedly that Clark is planning on making a difference, and I believe in that. But at the same time, I just want to make sure there's no officers, whether they're from him as the chief to captains, lieutenants, sergeants, and on the road officers, black or white, if they have that spirit in them. We need to address it. That's all.
Hazen, I seem to recall that we had some, not only black, white, but we had some Latino immersion cultural type training a few years ago. Do you remember that?
We did. Jennifer Davis came in and did some training, but Tanya McGovern, who's on the call, I talked to her. We're going to look into some of these other training options, particularly about implicit bias. There's some groups that do a very good job in Charlotte, and get some proposals on how much it's going to cost to do that kind of stuff.
Pro Tem Garner, did you get all your questions answered? Did you have some more questions?
Well, that's leading into questions for Hazen, and really, where do we find that money? Is that, I mean,
I think we can find it this year. I mean, that would be my intention. We got 30 days left in the budget, and I don't know how busy they are. I remember last time we looked into this, they're a pretty busy group. I don't know if the economy's changed their busyness, but I'd like to see us spend it this year.
Hazen, could you enlighten us as to what you have in mind? What is the scope of this training?
So the
employees
the Center for Racial Justice is, I don't know if it's headquartered, but there's one in Charlotte. I think it's very intense training. There may be somebody here that knows more about it than I do, but
who would take the training? All employees, or who would take the?
I want to look at the cost. I think what I've heard other organizations do, they send a few people through this a year. You know, I mean, from my perspective, to start with department heads, leadership, and kind of, you know, then the second tier. It all depends on how much it's going to cost, and then are there different types of you know, implicit bias training? Is there a 20-hour program, and is there a 6-hour program? I think the other thing we kind of touched on, is there something we could do for the community, make it open to the community? And then how do you do that? Do you do it over a series of nights? Do you do it on a Saturday? What can they offer? How busy they are? But, and I think we should bring the Cultural Diversity Council into that discussion. I think it would be a great fit for them. I think Matthews is primed for and be very interested in this kind of training.
I think that I think that's the group that the county uses, and they're probably fairly used to fairly large groups. So the possibility that doing some cost sharing with another town is there. Pineville might be a good suggestion. I don't know how Hill would really feel about it, but I would at least look to Pineville to see if that's a possibility. But I think that on some level, all employees and all of us on the board need to have this kind of training. And so I guess I'm excited to see, you know, what the proposals are that you can come back with. And I hope I didn't sound like I was scrutinizing Chief Pennington. I have heard from one of the women that started the Race Matters for Juvenile Justice in Charlotte, which is well-renowned and well-respected. And she had great things to say about the Matthews Police Department. I just don't want us to get complacent in our training and expect that new officers coming in are up to that same level of standard.
I'll pick it back. I'd like to pick it back on Renee. Certainly as a leader, I never asked employees to do something that I would not participate in, as I did 4 years ago. I led the way in participating as commissioner, and I certainly want to take the training as well too, if there's some type of training offered this year.
Becky, did you have a comment?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I do just want to clarify for the benefit of the group, certainly echo Hazen's statements that we're happy to do more training. I think it's always welcome and beneficial, but I do just want to clarify that all employees did go through diversity training last fall in 2019. So it has not been since 2016 that we have not done anything.
Okay.
So I make sure that, that everyone knows that. But certainly, again, we're happy to get more on the books here in the next few months.
Thank you, Becky.
So we're getting a little bit off topic, but I do want to comment about Chief Pennington mentioned that he had written a response on Facebook. And if those of you that haven't seen that, I urge you to take a look at it regarding the George Floyd situation in Minneapolis. So very appreciative of Chief Pennington. It's a very, very well thought out, very well written statement saying that we here in Matthews don't use excessive force and don't believe that's the way to police. So thank you, Chief Pennington. That was very well written. Good job.
Great.
Does anybody have anything, other questions about the budget?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
And this is for CJ and Hazen. And Hazen, we talked a little bit about this Friday about the monies for Crestdale widening of the sidewalk, and there was $250,000, that 125 from the Senate, 125 from the legislature. And as you well know, the Senate sent it straight here, and the House money went over to DOT, where in turn last April, we were in conversation with DOT to get that money in the hands of Matthews. And in the memo that I brought there Friday, Hazen, in May of 2019, they were supposed to put that on the agenda for the DOT agendas in May. Can you tell me what happened as a result of that meeting with the DOT, you or CJ?
So that money went to the NCDOT Board of Governors, and they did approve that at $125,000, but it's always been a reimbursable grant, and we deal with the reimbursable grants a lot. So you have to spend the money first, and then you ask for reimbursement. And so we're still in the design phase of this. The intention is to write a letter to DOT requesting the money. I mean, we argue that that's not the same money as road money. This is money that's Matthews money that was directed, that they provide through Rachel Hunt and the House of Representatives. And I mean, I don't think they have a right to hold it, and that we need it. And we're going to press that case with them right away.
Charlie to write the letter.
I thought about that. I talked to Charlie about it. We could use him. My thought would be to write it to the appropriate, because we made copies of the letters, to the appropriate authority and CC Charlie and get a response back, and then maybe start to argue the legal. To me, right now it's a fairness issue, and then if they stonewall us, then I think we, like, legally, do they have the legal right really to hold that money? I mean, I'd like to.
I would like for Charlie. It comes from our town attorney. It's not their money; it's our money. And if they say that we spend it and they're reimbursed, if that's what they say and that's in the minutes, then I want the money. And I want it. I know they're in trouble, but that's not our fault. They should have sent the money over to us and let us have our own money. I don't like folks holding my money. I want my own money. I don't want nobody holding my money and tell me to spend there and reimburse, because we see what's happened now. But I would like Charlie to write the letter. Not that I don't have confidence in you, Hazen, and your letter, but I know coming from our town attorney, I think the DOT carries a little bit more weight or seriousness of what we intend for this money.
Okay.
Yeah, I just add on to that. I do think it's totally unacceptable that they got sticky fingers and absconded with $625,000 of money that was targeted for Matthews. So truly is our money. So it may be difficult to get it from DOT these days, but it wasn't theirs to keep. So good point. Are there other questions about the budget? Commissioner Urban, you've been quiet. You good?
No, not really. I mean, I think I understand everybody's points. The planter issue along Trade Street, the bulk of the money is coming out of tourism. I'm sure if CJ broke it out from a manpower standpoint, it'd be a very small amount of money. So I'm not too worried about that. But I think, we all along have been planning this idea of bonds, whether it's a different series of bonds and stuff like that. Unfortunately, we've missed that boat for a myriad of reasons. But I think if come October, the mini planning conference Hazen's talking about, we really need to dig in and talk about that, because that may be the only vehicle we have in which to do some realistic public safety infrastructure catch up, but be mindful that sometimes it isn't the best thing to use for roads, for example. But I'm sure there's something we can do. But I think inevitably, Hazen's absolutely correct. We're not a 28-cent community. We're probably 32, 34-cent community. But there's an education process that's going to have to be with that. And right now it's just not a discussion for the public, but I think as we turn the new year and refocus on this, we can get there. And I think the community will stand behind us in both the bonds and possible tax increases if it means the betterment of the entire community.
Okay. I'll echo something that I've heard Assistant Town Manager Hawk say a few times, and that is that bonds give you a one-time shot, right, Becky? I mean, that's
Oh yeah.
But it definitely needed. I've said ever since I've been an elected official that I think we keep kicking the can down the road on our paving needs, and we really need to take some action. So I don't disagree that a bond, particularly for paving, might be a good option for us. Commissioner Bland, do you have anything to add about this topic or anything on the budget?
Oh, no, I'm good. I tried to hear what the chief said and some of what Commissioner Whitley said. I was glad to hear those comments.
Do any of the commissioners want to change anything in the current budget? Do you think it needs some more?
I would like to discuss the human resources software, and if it's not something that we can work into this budget, make it something that we talk about in October. And because I feel like we can talk about the budget as a solitary item, but really we're taking things that have been kicked down the road. We need to be the ones that pick that can up and do something with it. So if it's not this budget, then we start talking about the deputy fire chief and the HR software in October and possibly implement it in January.
Okay, I believe when we started talking about the HR software, the reason I was familiar with Paycom is my former employer started using it, and it was a huge cost savings and very much liked by the employees, because you had everything, on your smartphone. You could see your pay and vacation and all that sort of thing. So it's kind of a nice thing, and it eliminated a lot of redundant documentation. I remember at Combraco one time we had about 5 people recording people's vacation, in 5 different spots, so a lot of redundancy. So I'm not saying the town's doing that, but if we can tighten up and maybe use some of that software, that's probably a good idea. The comment I was making, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I see it as a benefit of freeing up some of human resources time and other departments' time. And as we talk about these issues of training, really human resources should have the time and the availability and to pay attention to those issues that need addressing. This is something that we can do within our power as a board to get that moving and prevent possible problems in the future.
Okay. All good points. And yeah, as we kick around this budget, and I think the reason I thought of Corey's name instead of CJ. We were talking about beautification, and I was thinking about parks and things like that. But before we started recording, when just a few of us were on, we were chatting, and I made the comment, and I've made this comment to some of you commissioners talking to you one-on-one, that, I think that we have tasked staff to come in with a budget. We've said, don't use any of the general fund money, don't raise taxes. And that's all very difficult, and they've done that. So I don't think it's necessarily the position that this board should really nitpick the budget apart. I think we've noted some areas we need to look at, the HR software, perhaps a deputy chief, lots of other needs. I know Mayor Pro Tem Garner requested, and others of you have requested cuts that were made from each area that we can review in October. So it'd be my recommendation that, I think staff has done what we've asked them to. Unless somebody has some real heartburn, I would recommend that we move forward with the budget as presented and consider some of the items that were brought up today, the implicit bias training, certainly consider Commissioner Miller's comments about public works and, and also park and rec and all those kind of things that add to the quality of life. So we have a lot of needs. It is going to be difficult going forward with a 28-cent tax rate. Something we're going to have to discuss. So does anybody disagree that or want to really change something in the current budget that you don't like? If now, please. Everybody's good? I see a lot of thumbs up. Larry, you good?
Yeah, I'm good. I do have one other question before, but I'm good with the budget and where we are. I'm satisfied with this. Back to where I was sharing, and this is for Hazen and Becky, if y'all can help me with this, please. Being fair and equitable is something I ran on along with affordable homes. I just believe that we as a town have got to be fair to all races and percentage-wise, or even a little bit more. And I think I spoke a little bit about this. If you just have one person of color in a department, it's just a token. So you say, well, I've got one here. I've hired a person of color. But Hazen and Becky, would you put together for me all of our department heads and their assistants and those people underneath them that makes over $80,000 a year? And if you do that, then let me know how many persons of color make $80,000 a year or more. That's all the department heads, and I know all of the heads, and I know you do too. But I'm curious to see in the past years, have we been diverse enough in hiring? I know we have hired at the lower level, and I know that Chief had hired some new officers on the police department. The fire department has, and I know that CJ has too as well too. But I'm curious to see how many people of color make over $80,000 in the upper echelon of the town of Matthews. Could you put together that for me, please?
Happy to.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Do we have any other discussion regarding the budget or any final comments to staff? Sounds like everybody's okay. I think obviously we've got a lot of things to discuss in October. And so thank you all. Everybody's had a lot of really good input. I'd like to move.
Sorry, I know you asked, but as we talk about October, can we get an idea of what we're looking at for that so that it doesn't get pushed, into the back of my mind? Those budget items that we'll be discussing in October for re-examination in January.
So what I hear you saying, Commissioner Garner, is like an agenda, sort of a loose, let's say a loose agenda kind of outlining what and it could always change, but at least it gives us an idea of what we want to do in whatever, 5 months.
Yes, so that I mean, I just feel like things to me are really segmented. That's something I can carry forward with me and think about in the interim.
I think that's something we're probably not going to be able to say right this second, but staff will put together a loose agenda in the next week or two and circulate to make sure we didn't forget anything. All right, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Thank you. This has been a very painful budget, and we're in pretty extraordinary times. So thank everybody for all your input and patience. Going on to our next agenda item, to consider the establishment of a citizen steering committee on the locally preferred alternative for the Link Silver Line and appointments to the committee. I think everybody saw during our last council meeting when Andy Monk, is that his name? Monk? Came in and presented to us and showed the several possible, at least 3 different possible routes for the Silver Line. I like to say 3.5. There were a couple offshoots, you know, that we could do this or that. So we thought it was important to at least get some advice from the community. And Lori, I don't know, do we have that list available? If not, that's okay. So what we did is put together a list of folks. Renee helped with this, as well as Hazen, and didn't want to make this a necessarily a mayoral task force. So I want the rest of the commission, the rest of the board to approve this and get your input on it. But we have asked these people to serve as advisors to us, that they have very disparate viewpoints on what the locally preferred alternative should be. We took 3 people from the planning board, Jana Reeve, Natasha Edwards, and Carrie Lamson, 3 from TAC, Bill Stevens, Chris Hoff, and Lou Abernathy, and then just some people from the community, Lynn Lewis, Jennifer Saunders, Walter Wright is a young gentleman that applied for the diversity committee and was not appointed, but is getting, Renee, what is he getting his master's in?
In public policy.
In public policy, so a good guy. Fred Baylor, I think a lot of you know. Of course, Jim Johnson. So we've put together a list of about 11 people. We could, at the wish of any of you, add a few more people if you wanted to. We don't want this committee to get too huge, but 3 from TAC, 3 from the planning board. It's a pretty diverse committee. You know, it's got female, male, some folks of color are involved. So it's a diverse representation of our town. Nothing binding. We're just going to ask this group to meet and meet quickly, because this is all chugging along. That's why we put this together so fast. I think they're basically going to have June to look at what's out there and maybe make some recommendations to us. They're again non-binding. We don't have to necessarily take their recommendation, but it's good to get some folks to debate this. This will have town staff liaisons. Susan and Dana will be. Is that right, Hazen? Will be
in the planning board. It's really going to be a dovetail between the planning staff and transportation.
Okay, so Jay will probably be involved as well. And initially we wanted to have John Muth, who is the former deputy director for development with CATS, which would have been in a Matthews native, or a native, lives in Matthews. He would have been awesome. And we really wanted John to chair this committee, because he just retired from CATS after 31 years of service, knows everything about the light rail, intimately. And unfortunately, he left his job Friday, retired from CATS, and started working today for BSB. Is that right? Or VHB?
VHB.
VHB. It's a consulting firm. same one that Luba that presented about the park works for. But anyway, he's going to be the managing director of the Charlotte office. And as such, it's a conflict of interest for him to serve on this committee because he's actually being hired by others to consult about the Silver Line. So we couldn't get him. So Hazen and I spoke this afternoon. We think we would like to pull this group together, let them elect a leader, perhaps, from among them. Again, if you think there's somebody that you think that's really important that should serve on this, we don't want this committee to get too huge, but we could appoint a couple more people if we wanted to. So really tonight, I'm just asking, informing you of this group and hopefully getting your commissioner's blessings to move forward with this process. Just give us some more input from the community rather than us just sitting at the dais discussing this stuff. We'll have, so a very diverse, disparate group of folks meeting and discussing what they think is important. You're probably aware that CATS is already proposing a locally preferred alternative. So we just have to advise if we want to diverge from that. I know one of the lines could conceivably go through Family Dollar. So a lot of different options here, but we expect this group to meet 3 or 4 times in June and maybe bring up some discussion points that we haven't thought of ourselves. So if anybody has any comments or questions about this, now's your chance to. Everybody on board with this? Hazen, is it, or I don't know if we can't necessarily take a vote on this, can we?
It's a regular meeting, Mayor. I mean,
We could.
Yeah.
Jeff is raising his hand if you can't see him.
I can't see him. Commissioner Miller?
Thank you. I think we're missing some stakeholders on this. I think we need someone from Family Dollar. I think we need someone from Novant. I think we need someone from the entertainment district. I would look to see who owns a lot of the property on Industrial Drive, I guess, that goes behind Family Dollar to the right of East 74 Restaurant. I think they are the ones most affected financially and through their land, etc. And without Family Dollar, without Novant, without Entertainment District represented, and a few more ideas, I think this is a decent list of citizens, but not necessarily the best representation of stakeholders.
Okay, would like to comment on that. I don't necessarily disagree. Couple comments. One, okay, who are those people? Because we need to start. We need this group meeting this week, so we're really trying to hurry.
Right. It's a 2030 plan.
Because they're doing the design work. They're trying to get to a certain design stage within the next 18 months, and so they're gonna start saying this is the route we're going to take, and they're going to start doing the engineering work to design that route.
Also, I think it's important to recognize that CATS itself has tried to engage with Dollar Tree it's a Dollar Tree.
Yeah.
And they haven't had a response from them. There's been a lot of input already from Novant. They've kind of already let their voice be known, but a lot of these people are the people that are, it's not about maybe dollars and the profitability of larger corporations, but we were looking at it from how will this impact the people who live around the rail or have access to the rail. The planning board knows the ins and outs of what the planning department has put together. The Transportation Advisory Committee knows all of the transportation plans that are in place. And so how can we fit all of those pieces together when Katz has already done a really, their due diligence in contacting those large property owners kind of around the tentative plans.
The cat is agreeing with you too.
I hear a cat and I've got a whimpering dog behind my door over here. So fair points. What I would like to do is get this group started the meeting. And if we need to add some folks, Commissioner Miller, I certainly don't have a problem with if we can find somebody from Family Dollar or, unfortunately, Novant's in transition with Roland, but if we could find somebody from Novant that would be okay with sitting on this committee, I don't have any problem with it. I just think we need to get going very quickly. Commissioner Miller.
So when we add someone to the planning board as an alternate, or we add someone to Park and Rec or Transportation Advisory Committee, we interview those people, we vote on them. But something as serious as this, we're eliminating that process?
Again, this was done for expediency's sake, not to be non-transparent or anything. We just wanted to go. I mean, Andy's telling us we need to be, endorsing our locally preferred alternative in July. I don't think we have time to meet and interview people and all that. These are all, we've already interviewed everybody on the planning board and the TAC. We certainly know these folks, and I think we know most of the other people on this list.
Hey, Mayor, I think this is like a ad hoc committee that's gonna just do some information for us. I don't see a need for us to interview nobody. I think everybody pretty much know everybody on this list. I know I do. But I think for you looking for expedience so that we can get some input from, and I'm looking at the list and I think the town is pretty represented on this list. But I'm in favor of moving forward. If somebody else you can think of that want to be on this list, but I don't think there's need to be interviewed. Just call them if they're willing to serve and let them meet, and then whatever your wish is, trying to give some input so that you can bring it back to the board, and along with their input and the board's input, I think we're good.
I mean, certainly other names that have come forward are well known to everybody. People like David Blackley or the Williams. I'm not sure. What are you thinking about on the entertainment district, Commissioner Miller? Like the Brigmans or?
Yeah, the Brigmans come to mind, yes. And or CPCC if it's going to go on the other side.
That's fair. Again, our thought process was we don't want to have like 25 people on a committee because you know how those committees work, not very well. But I would suggest that, or like to ask the board to endorse this going forward. And if you have ideas, we're not going to necessarily deny anybody from joining if they want to. We could still add people after today. This would maybe be.
How many you got on the list now, Mayor? How many is the list? I don't see a whole.
We've got 11 people. We've got 11. We certainly could add 3 or 4 more probably, because probably not everybody's going to show up for every meeting, etc. So if there are some glaring holes or some people you guys feel really should be on this list, we can certainly add 3 or 4 more if we need to. I think this is a good list to start with.
Susan is raising her hand, but before I have a question for you, Susan, before you speak. Sorry, Mayor, to interrupt. I just didn't know if you could see her. Susan, was it the MTC? What meetings did we go to where they were in discussion with Stallings and Indian Trail and discussing Family Dollar and Novant? I mean, do you feel like they've already been contacted and they've already had fair input, or do you think that there needs to be additional input?
Great segue. That's exactly what I wanted to bring up, is if it offers peace of mind, CAT staff has been very diligent in trying to get contact information for those large property owners. Jay has helped with, you mentioned Family Dollar, Novant. Dana has provided that information for our contacts at Novant. For the entertainment district, we do know that CATS has met with the developer that's currently developing the apartments out there as a large landowner. I'm not sure if they've been able to get up with the Brigmans yet. They've had a meeting with CPCC. Dana was able to sit in on that meeting as well. So as much as possible, Dana is trying to attend those meetings so that we, the town staff, can hear what those property owners have to say as well, and just not have it, through the grapevine from CATS. So CATS is trying to be very diligent about those large property owners.
And Susan, you could advise this group if you're attending some of these meetings as well as to what some of those opinions were, correct?
Yes, we can do that.
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Urban, yes, sir.
I will first of all say I feel a little left out of the loop with the other commissioners. I don't know how Jeff feels or McCool feels or Larry feels about nothing even floated to us about throw some names into the hat. That's my first opinion.
Okay.
My second one is I'm definitely in line with Jeff in terms of the mix here. We can go with this. This is fine, but it doesn't seem to look towards. It may look to somebody that might use CATS, but it doesn't look like it's focused on anybody that might be impacted by CATS. Let's say Bo Holsley at the lumberyard, as an example from that standpoint. And it also doesn't bring to point, like Jeff had mentioned, employees or employers that would be impacted from the rail. Again, that could be Bo, that could be Novant. You have folks have wanted to get more involved, like Mark Moore and David Johnson and folks like that. So we're missing some leadership from the community here. It's fine to have all these folks from TAC on there, Lou Abernathy, I will be very public and question that. Jim Johnson has always been the go-to as a small business owner. But I think there's a lot of other business owners that have been very forefront in a lot of the activities been going on lately in the last 2 years. So, fine moving this ball forward, but I think we're missing some opportunities. Someone mentioned the entertainment complex. That's Wyatt Dixon. Here you got an opportunity to get a voice from a person outside the community who's been building in the community. I think it's very, very helpful. So I know you got to start someplace, but sometimes we end up rushing to judgment too quickly and we stumble over ourselves. So I tend to fall in Jeff's court at this point in time.
Flat Purser would be another person other than the lumberyard that I hadn't mentioned.
I tend to disagree that Jim Johnson is always the go-to. I feel like David Johnson has had a lot of good opportunities, and I like David. He lives across the street from me, but he's had a lot of opportunities for input where I haven't seen Jim have those opportunities. And a lot of these people on here have been very involved in town events or town discussions, but have never had the opportunity to serve on a task force, which is why their names came up. We tend to have a lot of the same names and the same faces on these stakeholders meetings, and it's nice to get a little bit of variety in there.
Well, that's why I find Jim Johnson is he seems to be a common denominator in a lot of them. And frankly, I would not be opposed to sometimes a thorn in the saddle isn't a bad thing. The Williams, Frank Jr. and Sr. and David Blackley have been a little bit more outspoken lately. Sometimes you need that rub to polish that piece of coal to a diamond. So I'm not opposed to that group either. Maybe they have a representative that can work with more of the owners downtown, like Sante and the others.
I wouldn't call David Blackley a thorn in anybody's side and would appreciate his input.
I didn't mean as a thorn in the side. I'm saying that they've been very outspoken about some of the things we've been doing. So David, the two Franks, I think it's Elaine's wife's name, the owners of Sante, et cetera. And they have not been running parallel with a lot of thought process in the town of Matthews, but that also helps in the discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Well, let me get Commissioner McCool. He's been raising his hand.
Okay.
Was there an application process for everyone? The top 6, I understand, but the people who are in the community, who made this decision? Because I haven't heard a thing about it. It's the first I've heard about it is tonight. And I think, quite frankly, this should have been an application process, because I know for a fact there's plenty of people in the town who would like to be on this board, but haven't had the chance to apply for it or get on it. And I think that's a little, feels wrong to me. That kind of gets under my skin a little bit. I think we should have let some people who maybe want to get their voices heard, but didn't know, aren't, in the political realms of Matthews. I think we should have left this to an open application process.
I'll respond to that. Again, this was done for expediency. The reason we're discussing it tonight is if anybody has a lot of heartburn about it, we can change directions. If this was done purely, I'll take the hit for it. I did it so we could do it quickly. I feel like we had time to, wait to our next town council meeting, et cetera. But to be fully transparent, that's why we're discussing it tonight. So if there's issues or again glaring holes in this group that we've got, we can certainly add some more people, or even if there's a problem with anybody on this list, we can take somebody off. But
it's not that I have a problem. I guess I wasn't big into town events a year and a half ago, but this may have been something I would have wanted to apply for before I ran for the board. And when it's only people that we know, I think we miss a large part of our population who maybe aren't as active but want to have their voices heard. That's just me. I don't know how the rest of the board.
I think
these are people that have previously expressed interest in serving on different boards and things. That's where most of the names came from. Commissioner Whitley, do you have a comment?
Yes, I do. I've heard and I agree with what everybody's saying, but I know what you're trying to do too, Mayor. I would like to say, let's pick these 11 and let's cut it off at 15, and we can add some of those other that John and Jeff were talked about to the list. But for the sake of expediency, let's go ahead and get started so we can get these people together, and then we can add those others on. I don't think we need an application. I think you as mayor, you've got a pretty good feel on all these people on the board, and I think you've got a good mix of all over the town. So I would like to go ahead with these 11, put a cap at 15, no more than 15. You don't want to have it too heavy. And then we got 4 other people that if you, along with whoever commissioner want to think that they need to be on there, could add to make it 15. That's my recommendation. I would like to move forward with it with you on this list.
And I would like to say, just for the sake of it, Ken, I'm serving as the alternate on the MTC. So when I was pulled into this conversation, it was because I have some understanding of what the process, where they are in the process of the Silver Line. But the people that we nominated, I do know Lynn fairly well.
I know Lynn very well. She's
and
awesome.
But let me finish what I'm saying. And she walks around downtown a lot, and where she lives is going to be impacted by the Silver Line. But Jennifer Saunders and Walter Wright, I don't know as well, but I feel like their input is going to be valuable and not something that we typically bring to these task forces.
I understand. I just think the whole board should have been in on this.
Well, you are. We're voting on it tonight. If you don't like it, don't vote for it. I'm honestly, I say this was done purely for transparency. We can scrap it and not have a advisory board.
I think it's a great idea to have the advisory board. I'm excited about it.
We just got to do this in 30 days. We got to crank through this. Commissioner Miller.
So it's a 2030 plan. We had a presentation 1 week ago, and we have to vote on a board tonight, right?
That's correct, because they're starting the design phase of this line. So they're not going to design 3 or 4 different alternate routes through Matthews. They're going to have, trying to remember, perhaps Commissioner Urban or Mayor Pro Tem Garner may know, the design phase being, was it 15% complete or 35%? I forget what the goal is.
35%.
35% of the design complete within like 18 months from now. So they're not going to design.
They were going to have town halls, town meetings, public input during this time, correct?
we had ours. We did, they did it here.
But they'll have more. I mean, it wasn't just that one. There will be more, but I guess the missing information here is that when you serve on the MTC, you have continual updates on this process. They aren't going to come back to the board and give us monthly updates. That's what serving on the MTC does, is following along in the action.
5 of the 7 of us are not on the MTC. And like I said, we were given a 2030 plan 7 days ago with a schedule of town meetings or town hall meetings or community meetings. And this seems a bit sudden to me. I can't approve it.
Okay. That's fine. They are going to ask us what our locally preferred alternative is in July of this year. And we're going to have to answer that question. So I was just trying to get some input from the community. If the consensus of the board is we don't want input from the community, you don't want this board, then I suggest that we come up with another one pretty quickly.
I want input from the community. And I'd like to start with this and then cap it off at 15. If we got some more people we want to add, let's do that. Let's move forward.
Is that a motion, Commissioner Whitley?
It is a motion.
I will second that motion.
All right. We have a motion by Commissioner Whitley, second by Mayor Pro Tem Garner. We'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner McCool, how do you vote, sir?
Nay.
Nay. Okay. No. Commissioner Miller?
No.
Commissioner Whitley?
Yes.
Commissioner Urban?
I will support it. Not agreeing with it, but I'll support it.
Commissioner Bland?
Yes.
And Mayor Pro Tem Garner?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. That passes 5-2, I believe, with Commissioner Miller and Commissioner McCool voting no. Thank you for supporting this. Yeah, and I want to really, and for transparency's sake, let you know this was done purely for expediency. I'm trying to keep anybody out of the process, and that's why we were discussing it tonight. I welcome other people that you want to add to this. I think you had some good suggestions, so let's add some more names. Get those to staff as soon as possible. If you have additional names you think would be good fits, whether it be David Blackley or some of the other names that Commissioner Urban and Commissioner Miller brought up. Certainly welcome those to add to it. I think it's just going to make us have a more informed process. And Commissioner Miller, to your point, they have just really expressed to me as being on the MTC that they want to nail down a locally preferred alternative. They've actually already designated one. They've already told us there's already is a locally preferred alternative, and we're supposed to endorse that very soon. So is what the line they've put on the map, is that what we want? And I honestly don't know at this point.
Have we seen it?
Yes.
It was one of the 4 last week.
Yes, there was one of them that was LTA.
So the point of clarification, so the board did adopt a locally preferred alternative several years ago.
Many years ago.
What CATS is trying to do is more in-depth look to make sure, okay, is that it? And they're going to use a bunch of criteria in the process to really kind of factually test to make sure we got a good route. The other problem with the locally preferred alternative that the board adopted unanimously is there's some relatively sharp turns. And what they talk about is sharp turns or turns are very detrimental to light rail tracks. So they're trying to figure out if there's a way, and there's among other variables too, but that's just a good example. We have several, under our locally preferred alternative, LPA, there's several tight turns already.
Mr. Miller.
I just want to assure that, so Family Dollar, Lat Purser, the Matthews Building Supply, and Prophet Dixon have been reached out to, but will not be represented on this committee, correct?
No, they can be. I said we could add people.
And I think to echo what Susan was saying, they've had just one-on-one meetings with CAT, so their input hasn't been glazed over or ignored. This is an opportunity for people who are more intimately involved with Matthews to have a voice in the possibility.
And in case I didn't mention it just now, Novant as well. I feel like those companies have been slighted, honestly.
I can tell you from everything that I have heard, Novant has been the loudest in their feedback on how they feel about the Silver Line.
Okay.
So again, anybody that has some input, if Jeff, if you would like Lat Purser, for instance, to serve on this committee, we certainly can ask him. And I think the motion that was voted on will allow us to add up to 4 more people. So if you have someone you feel strongly about, please let us know. We'll reach out to them and see if they're willing to serve.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to the last agenda item. Consider the use of parklets in public parking areas for temporary restaurant seating. Hazen, are you going to present this?
No, sir. Jay Camp is.
Okay, Mr. Camp.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Let's see if I can get into presentation mode here. Everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for your time this evening. I was asked to give a quick update on perhaps what the town could do to create first more public open space downtown, but also what can we do to help business owners that are still struggling with social distancing requirements as part of North Carolina's phased reopening of the state. Really, cities across the country are making, well, for government, very, very fast changes to policies and programs to create a relaxation of requirements for outdoor dining regulations. Here locally, just one example, Belmont, they just recently started closing their Main Street down, I believe on Fridays and Saturdays or Friday and Saturday evenings. And they're putting tables and chairs outside and people can get food from restaurants, bring it out into their main streets. So they've taken a very proactive approach. Charlotte's looking at relaxing some of their parking regulations on private property, minimum parking requirements to allow more outdoor dining. So with that, I wanted to talk about really a couple of key items here. And I think I've kind of touched on these, but in the final one I'm going to get to in a moment will be the legal ramifications. If I had to summarize what we're going to talk about today, so if everyone doesn't know what has anyone ever seen a parklet? I can't see a show of hands from everyone, but parklets, they've been around for probably 5 to 10 years now. Typically, they're a semi-permanent installation within on-street parking. You create seating areas, dining areas, green space. People have gotten creative. They'll do a little putting green sometimes in them. So they're a neat but a little bit more permanent installation sometimes. The second item I want to talk about, which really directly addresses COVID-19, is street dining. A lot of communities are opening up extra asphalt in the public right-of-way to allow the temporary installation of tables and chairs for restaurants to use. And then finally, what I mentioned just a moment ago, what Charlotte's doing and what a lot of other cities are doing is the potential temporary reductions in minimum on-site parking for businesses to allow them to utilize their parking lots for outdoor dining. So parklets, this I just pulled a few in. You can Google them. There are thousands of examples on the internet. I pulled just 1 or 2 examples, but as you can see here, this is in the public right-of-way. Typically, this is your public sidewalk. You try to build them so that they line up so that they're at a 0 grade transition, so you're not stepping up and down from a curb. As you can see, this is an installation that would probably be here for several months or a year or more. So it's not something that's just going to come pop up on Friday night and be gone the next day. these can be led by the community. They can be done as a pilot project where the town would foot the cost, or they can be a partnership where a property owner actually leases the space from the town for a set amount of time for their utilization for dining or food and beverage consumption for their business. Here's another example that's a little bit different. You can see there is a transition here. Notice the utilization of vertical separation to create that clear delineation between the travel lanes and the dining areas. And just stop me. I don't have a lot of slides, so if anybody, I can't see everyone, so just speak up if you have a question, or I'll just keep moving if you don't. The next, and let me preface this by saying, all of these images are not, we're guilty sometimes of showing you the best, prettiest images we find. We're trying to explain a thought or an idea. These are not all beautiful images. This is real life. This is Norfolk, Virginia. This is an example of, look, we've got an immediate problem. We've got to solve it. They've taken, did somebody speak up? I'm sorry. They've taken public parallel parking, used some temporary barricade, and allowed businesses to put tables and chairs in that area. So this is one quick reaction. Another one here, which probably has a little bit more of a European look. If you've been in some of this, if you've seen images of Italy or France or other small or other communities overseas, it's very common to see dining in the public rights of way. And then finally, I said not all the images were beautiful, very utilitarian, but look, it gets the job done. These are some a little heavier duty barricades. This is probably a busier street. This is Tampa, Florida. But as you can see, the before up in the left, and then the after, where the restaurants have come in and created their outdoor dining areas. And then finally, this would be dining reductions in on-site parking. Obviously, we wouldn't want to impact accessible parking. I don't know what the situation was here, but that is one fairly easy way to allow some additional dining for properties outside of downtown. I put together a quick map, just thinking in my head what businesses, these red dots indicate just a few examples of businesses in downtown that could utilize a program like this. Many of our food and beverage establishments are lucky to have patios, and some of them are quite substantial. If you think of Grace O'Malley's, they already have a very, very substantial outdoor patio. But for instance, we did have a request from the owner of Portrait Gallery. They do have a back patio, but they don't have any space out front. So they did make a formal request for us to look into this. I think of Royal Creperie over here on Matthew Station Street. I think they maybe only have 2 tables outside. It's a very, very small establishment. So there's a couple examples of areas where this could work. So to kind of rein us in here, what would a program look like? I think we first want to hear from you all. Is this something you're interested in? Second, it would require a board resolution. There was a recent relaxation by the state ABC Commission on rules and regulations for ABC permit owners, in that you can now expand outside of your 4 walls into the public right-of-way, for instance. That the direction was that boards should consider a resolution if they're going to allow consumption of alcohol in the right-of-way. If this was something that the board did want to move forward with, we would put together an approval process, obviously taking into consideration safety and timeframes. I did have a very brief conversation with Susan on Friday about this, and we would certainly be evaluating every location if this were to move forward. But with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have about this.
Can you go back to the non-presentation view, please?
Sure.
All right. Any questions or comments from the board? What are your thoughts, Commissioner Miller?
Thank you. I would support this premise wholeheartedly. I didn't like the one slide. Jay, I appreciate you're getting some images. Those were great. The ones with the sand-filled DOT barriers in red wasn't so attractive. The cedar might be expensive, but a couple planters, etc., would be wonderful for the few locations that don't have outdoor dining at all. I would support this for the social distancing aspect, and I think it's a creative outside the box idea, and I thank you for bringing it to us.
You know, one item to keep, sorry.
Go ahead, Jay.
I was going to say one item to keep in mind is some of the businesses may want to put out temporary tables and chairs just for a Friday evening or Saturday evening. And what's complicated there is how do you make that a safe environment to ensure that a car is not going to try to turn into a parking space that they've been parking in for 10 or 15 years. So creating that delineation on a temporary basis. If you went back to that slide I shared of Norfolk, that was parallel parking, and I think it was easy to delineate it. But I would be strongly leaning on our town engineer for advice on how we would make this a safe situation if it was just for 1 or 2 evenings a week.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner.
How does that, I know a lot of cities and towns are doing this. How does that play out in terms of financial side? Like if we as a town are governing how it has to look, is that because the town itself is providing the barriers, or are we going to put the cost burden on the restaurants themselves?
I think it could go either direction. I think you also want to think about, you know, some communities will charge a fee. I think the one of the parklets I read about, the community, it was in Vermont, they had paid the community $2,500, and it was, you know, they have so much snow up there, it was a summertime only, but they were taking public property for their sole use for a certain amount of time. In this more temporary situation, and the fact that businesses are struggling, I mean, I would personally advise against requiring additional funds to be spent for folks. So, but that, I mean, that's just my advice. I think it certainly needs to be up for discussion.
Mr. Miller.
Could we possibly use tourism funds or funds from Park and Recreation of events that we haven't had and channel it into something of this nature, perhaps? Question.
Good. That's a great question. Very creative. We can run that rabbit. I mean, the idea would be to put this back on the agenda the 8th, if the board likes this idea. Is that correct, Jay?
Yes.
We would need to get an answer to, because it does need to be safe, right? Whatever's done, actually safety probably trumps aesthetics. So I think that's the nut you got to figure out, is how do you make it safe? But we can certainly figure out or check into the tourism aspect, or tourism dollar aspect.
Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. Hazen or Chief Pennington, when we recently approved barriers that cannot be driven over for Matthews Alive, perhaps, I'm not sure when the purchase is, but if those are going to be purchased or already were purchased with the trailer for storage, could those be used with a little bit of greenery?
Hazen, do you want me to take that?
Sure.
We have purchased them. We do have them in. They are more of a safety barrier rather than, as you just discussed, a beautification barrier. I do want to remind you how they work. So they are one that will lift the car up off of its wheels so that it can no longer travel. It's not going to be a necessary safety barrier for something like this. And I'll be honest with you, it's similar to your red and color DOT barriers that you weren't all that excited about. It's not very pretty, and it looks very industrial, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
Jay, are you aware of any communities using park space? I mean, could we set up Stumptown Park as a dining area?
Yeah, so I have to give some credit. I was talking about this with Shana in the planning department, Shana Robertson, and she brought up, what about the vacant lot on Matthew Station Street? You know, could the town do a chair and table installation there that would allow people to get their to-go orders and have kind of, you know, create kind of a temporary space with, you put out a few waste receptacles, tables, chairs. I'm not sure how we would handle the alcohol piece of that. If, I don't know if you do that as a weekly event, only on Friday or Saturday nights. The Red Brick got that authority to do some time back. But that's certainly an option, a temporary option we could do this summer in that lot that may be a little bit safer than some of the on-street options.
Thinking of it from a safety standpoint.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem Garner, do you have a comment or question?
Well, I was going to say, listening in on one of the, I don't know which call, I think Wilmington and Greensboro and other cities in North Carolina are doing this. And do we have any idea what their guidelines are and what their approach is?
Yeah, I've got a copy of Charlotte's guidelines, and I could certainly pull some from other communities, but it's been done, I would say, not in a hasty in a bad way, but it's been done in a quick manner. I'll see what I can dig up. Not a lot's been published, but I can certainly reach out to some other communities.
Yeah, I think it was probably Wilmington, but they were talking more about expanding restaurant space into parking lots and instead of, street front dining.
Commissioner Bland.
Winston-Salem, I know, has probably 10 or 15 restaurants downtown that use that type of concept on their sidewalks, all up and down, I guess, what's 4th Street in Winston-Salem.
Yeah, the town manager and I were discussing earlier today that a lot of communities, I don't know if Asheville still does this, if anybody's familiar, but they used to do something on the green or whatever, and they would literally shut whole streets down, and they would have dining in the middle of the road. It's almost like Matthews Alive. You shut down a portion of the street. As we discussed, that probably wouldn't be real popular with some of our business owners, but another option. There are other comments? How do you guys feel about this? I'll say that a couple comments. One, a couple of the photographs you showed us don't look like there's a lot of social distancing. It looks very tightly packed seating. That's a little bit of a concern. I don't know if that's because that was pre-COVID when the pictures were taken or not, but I would want us to still respect the social distancing. But secondly, I'd like to say I absolutely support this because I think it could help our business owners recover some funding. And I would hope that, I forgot who said it, but we could do it at minimal or no cost for them because they're struggling right now. And this would help them recover some of their income. So also, I think that the people that live here would love to have the opportunity to go out and eat in a safe environment. So I would support it. How does everybody else feel?
I like it. I think it's a great idea.
Cool. You like it?
Yeah, Mayor, just looking at those places that Jay had, I know that Mo's already got some outside seating. Seaboard has, Temple, Beer Temple has, and I think it's the restaurant right down below that has got outside seating already. I can see the one over at the Portrait. I can see where they can add maybe over on that side, but I think a lot of them already have a lot of outside seating areas outside. So, I know I don't have no problem. I'm in favor, but I think, like you were saying, I think you got to make sure you sit on enough tables out where you have that social distancing outside. But I'm in favor of it.
Jay has I seem to recall there was some discussion about possibly using the railroad parking lot. Has that been discussed or is that being proposed at all?
I have not heard that discussion.
Okay. Would that have to go through the railroad or is that something the town could approve?
We could approve it.
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Miller?
I think the railroad parking lot is a wonderful idea, but it may only apply to the closest locations, food and beverage places. If I could suggest, some of those planters, the ground planters, if they can be picked up by a forklift, a squeeze, or some type of machinery, maybe those could be brought out as temporary bollards or protective areas. And if they're planted, they're already good looking. Take them from the sidewalk, bring them out to the edge of the parallel parking or whatever it is. And maybe those could be utilized with some stanchions.
Okay. Is there enough support for us to bring it forward to our next meeting? Seeing some heads nod. So I think, Jay, there's some generally some support. You may have to work out some more details, but I like the idea of possibly using that empty lot. That's a really good idea if we could make that work, because it is so safe there.
Yeah.
So for Hazen, so from our conversation earlier, we'll work on the resolution that would be needed for some aspects of this, and then over the next over the next 7 days, we'll work on a general framework for you all. We won't have an entire program put together, but for instance, you know, a 25% reduction in on-site required parking. You know, so just give you the basics. Talk a little bit about aesthetics and how you would close in these spaces to avoid the water barriers that were not popular in my images. But we'll have that general framework along with the resolution if that works for you all.
Great, thank you, Jay. Any other questions or comments for Jay or Hazel?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, Hazen, I guess the plan will be to bring the budget forward on our next regular meeting on the 8th.
Yes,
right?
sir. Yes, sir.
And
We have the
that's what we would-
ordinance, etc.
Okay, and again, on the steering committee that we kind of pulled together, if you have some suggestions, please send them to staff and myself as soon as possible, and we'll feel free to reach out if you have somebody that's willing to participate, but we want to probably add no more than 4 more people. I think some good names have been suggested, so let's try to get together on that and decide which 4, if we're going to add 4 more, those might be. And then finally, we will bring the use of parklets to allow some outdoor dining forward at our next meeting as well to vote on. Does anybody have anything else, any new business you want to address tonight? Seeing none. Yes, Hazel.
Motion to adjourn.
So sorry, Mayor, I did want to bring up something real quick. So the board, we talked about the mobility study. But that has not been approved. So the week of the 15th would like for the board. So we'd like the members of the board to meet, or a couple members of meet in small groups to make sure you guys are comfortable with the downtown mobility study, or if we can answer any questions. And I guess really maybe this is a reminder that staff will reach out and see when y'all are available that week and just answer any questions. One of the things we want to do to get this thing approved is if we get it approved, just remember nothing's going to be done, but it is a document, and that we can use it for grants from DOT. Obviously, we wouldn't put any grants forward without the board's approval, but it's a great document to have on record that's approved by the board. So we wanted to meet in small groups with you guys starting the week of the 15th of June.
Hey, Hazen, I asked this earlier and I'll ask again, what you and I discussed one-on-one, but what is the importance of having these meetings in small groups? I kind of like the dynamic of having all of us present and discussing things instead of it's almost like divide and conquer. If we're going to meet 2 here and 2 here, I'd like to hear what John Urban has to say, for instance. I think
actually, we would prefer to do it in a big group too, but it did feel like there was no inertia, whatever the opposite of inertia is. So it just kind of ground to a halt, and we thought, well, what are people's individual concerns that they're not saying in public, and in a quieter setting, can we explain something? But that is a lot of work on our part too. So
I would prefer for us to meet together personally.
Ideally, we could just put it on as a regular board agenda. It's just like, okay, what's stopping us from approving it? You know, let's get down to brass tacks and answer your question.
Well, let me go back to the board. What is the pleasure of the board? I mean, I don't want to speak for all of us. I would like for all of us to meet, but if you're more comfortable meeting one-on-one, or what's the pleasure of the board?
I like meeting in a big group, as everybody.
Commissioner Miller, thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ken. Hazen, question, was this the Dana one-on-one doodle poll?
Yes, it was. But we were really going to meet in small groups. But because only 2 of y'all had responded, and that's what we didn't understand. Like, we weren't making progress.
You want to name names, Hazen?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay, well,
Starts with a J.
I don't care which one, but my request has always been to separate the topic of parking from the topic of one-way streets and traffic flow and whatever else is on there, you know, pedestrian safety or whatever.
So show of hands, who would prefer to meet all together? Raise your hand. Okay, and looks like Mayor Pro Tem Garner, you prefer small group?
It doesn't matter to me. I've met with, I think with Dana. I don't remember. I've met with Dana and Susan about enough things that I've already kind of talked through my questions. So either way.
I kind of like the synergy of hearing what each of you have to say, because maybe you'll bring up something that I didn't think of and vice versa. So I think it's good when we're all together. If it's less work for you guys, I think let's just do it either as a special meeting, a 5:30, or if it's gonna be a 2 or 3 hour meeting, maybe we can meet on a Saturday morning or something.
By the end of June, I will have bought you all Town of Matthews masks.
Looking forward to that. We'll be styling and profiling. Is there any other business? Does that answer it for you, Hazen?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other new business? Anything we need to discuss? I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner McCool. All in favor? We're not going to go roll call. All opposed? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you, guys. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Y'all stay safe. Be blessed.
You do the same.